Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's session, Our Region Matters. This is the first of a series of mayoral forums that we will be hosting for the region. My name is David Duplisea, and I'm the CEO of the Saint John Region Chamber of Commerce. I would first like to thank our sponsor and valued chamber member, Encore Global, for their support for this election series. They have really helped us and advised us on the technology and on the best practices in order to produce this event. So we're very, very grateful to Peter and his valuable team. As well, a special welcome to our guests. We have Mayor Don Darling, Mayor Nancy Grant, Deputy Mayor Libby O'Hara, as well as MP Wayne Long and PC candidate Mel Norton are joining us as well. So a special welcome to those. And finally, to all of our guests, we have over 90 members that are registered for today. So thank you, everyone, for attending. Now, as we're preparing for this debate, we've heard from many stakeholders, and most of the members comment that this election is probably one of the most important that we've had in years. And that's not to say that they're not all important. But I do believe that given the financial and the economic situation, the pandemic, and finally the political and social landscapes that we're living within, have all created a critical situation. The decision that these mayors and these councils will make and will be making over the next few years will affect every business and every person in our communities and could very well do so for generations to come. So I want to say thank you. Thank you to each of our candidates that have offered to serve the public. And thank you for taking the time out of your days to speak to the business community today. As we continue, I have a couple of housekeeping items. First, I ask that you click on your mute button to minimize any background noise, and that's a standard now, I guess, in our new world with Zoom technology. And second, we will also provide an opportunity for you to ask questions at the end of the session if this time permits. Just simply use your chat button. Now, speaking of questions, over the past few weeks, we've had the opportunity to gather questions from a really wide number of members, citizens, and other stakeholders, and we've curated all of them. Now, without editing, we have sent all of these questions to our candidates, so they're very well aware of what the topics and items for discussion will be. Now, we've done this because we want to be completely open with all of our candidates and our members. We don't want to be confrontational. This is to be a dialogue and a discussion on moving our community forward. I also would like to thank and acknowledge the HDC, Human Development Council, who conducted a debate on Monday. And I'd like to thank Randy Hatfield and his organization for all the wonderful work that he and his group does for our community. As we know, strong social safety nets are critical in any vibrant community, and a social safety net is not possible without a strong and dynamic business community. So there is synergies between the two. Our format for this morning will allow each of the candidates an opportunity to present their vision and their plans for business and economic development for the future of our region. It will then be followed by a selection of candidates received, and that candidates it'll be then followed by a selection of questions received, and candidates will respond. Our four mayoral candidates running for Saint John are Darrell Bastarache, Donna Reardon, Mel Vincent, and Howard Yeomans. Unfortunately, last night and early this morning, there has been some situations where a couple of our candidates are unable to attend this morning. So Mr. Bastarache and Mr. Yeomans have sent regrets, and we hope all is well with them and that there's not an emergency of some kind. Our first candidate will speak, and I'm going to draw the names out of here. There's only two in here, I hope. And our first speaker will be Donna Reardon. Now, if Donna come up to the podium, and Carol will sanitize everything, and I will join the candidates in the seat.
Thank you, David, and thank you to the Chamber for this opportunity to meet today and to discuss some of these important questions that are facing Saint John. So I'll give you a little bit of information about myself to start. I moved to Saint John from Halifax in 1980. I took my first job at the General Hospital as a dietitian. And then my husband opened his practice in '84, and I will say that we were bewitched by Saint John, the architecture, the intimate, friendly community, and we loved Saint John, so we decided we would make this place our home base. So we bought a house on Germain Street in 1985, and at the time I was looking for a neighborhood that had some amenities, and that also had a school that my children could walk to and come home for lunch. And so there is a little inner city school, St. John the Baptist, King Edward. All 4 of my children went off down there. And once they began their career in public education, that's when I started my career as a volunteer. And so I, with a few other people, got the home and school organized down there at St. John the Baptist. And then shortly after that, the province came out with the SPAC DPAC configuration for parent involvement with schools. So with 4 children in the system, there was a year when I was sitting on 3 different SPACs at the same time. I moved on to the District Education Council. I also got involved with the Heritage Development Board. We own a heritage home in the city, and I got involved in transit and parking. In 2012, I ran for council, and I was re-elected in 2016. And after, so I've put 9 years into an 8-year mandate. I love to say that that demonstrates my commitment to St. John. So I guess it's that giving back to St. John is another reason when I looked at this and I thought the mayor wasn't going to reoffer, you know, where was I going with this? So after 9 years, we've done a lot of heavy lifting. Over those 2 councils, we changed the narrative on council. Mel Norton just said right up front, we're done with Comedy Council, we're going to a classy council, and we just began the work. So we developed a finance committee and a growth committee. There was 1 council from each ward on one or the other. The mayor was on both of those, and we just dug in and we came up with best practice policies in the for financial, long-term financial plan. On the growth side, the roadmap for smart growth, population growth strategies. We've met several times with the Premier to discuss our road going forward and some of the initiatives we were looking for. So, and all the time as we moved along, we always said, how can we do better? You know, what does success look like for us? So I guess when I envision St. John, my vision would be to have a more dynamic city with a more robust transit system, with more engaged citizens, with the growth that we're looking for, and with housing that would have options to meet the needs of all the citizens. So how are we going to get there? We're going to get there through tax reform is a big one, and supporting growth and making sure your growth is strategic, and is integrated with quality of life. So, so I'm looking to be your mayor to lead that team, and thank you very much.
Good morning, St. John. My name is Mel Vincent, and I'm one of the candidates for mayor in this upcoming municipal election. Big thank you to the Chamber for putting this event on, and David, to you for organizing it, and your fine complement of staff. And Carol, I certainly got a particularly singular you out, and you've been a real champion and leader for the Chamber and been the backbone for so much of what has gone on, and I thank you for your dedication to our community and specifically our business community. Real pleasure to see you here again today. To you, the residents watching this event, I think it's it's absolutely essential that we engage and participate in democracy and learn as much as we can about the candidates, not only for mayor, but also for council. And I fully recognize it's been a real challenge for us as candidates, and it's a challenge for you as voters to determine who you think best represents you and your wishes and where you think our city should and can go. We've as in our candidacy have certainly tried to lay out as many options as we can for you to get to know me better, because it's not only about questions, it's about personality, it's about approachability and those factors that go so greater than just questions, because we can script so many questions here today, we can't script all the questions that are going to come from tomorrow. So knowing the caliber of the individual, their morals, their values, their ethics are just as important to hearing the answers. And so it's a real pleasure to be here, and I would certainly say to you, Donna, it's a pleasure to share the stage with you and your commitment certainly to our city, and to Darrell and Howard, who who are with us today but were with us yesterday. I certainly appreciate their commitment to trying to make our city better than what it was yesterday. And like you, David, I too hope that everything is well with both of those gentlemen. And also a huge shout out to our council candidates. We've got a significantly large field vying for 10 seats, and I know they too are challenged with trying to get their message out. So I would encourage everybody to reach out. Social media today is our really our main conduit, and why we're on Facebook Live today and trying to get that message to you. So I certainly understand it. A little bit about me. Been a lifelong entrepreneur and leader in this community. I think as I sit here in this facility, I think back to 1984 when Prince Charles and Lady Di came here. I was a young high school student, had a couple of carts out on the boardwalk selling pop and chips and what have you to try to make my next endeavor in university a little more fiscally possible. It was a great time. Our city was going through great development, and this complex, the Hilton Hotel and Market Square, were certainly significant contributors to some success we had. And I look very much forward to the days when across the water, maybe a little bit to my left, when the Fundy Quay and so many other projects that are on the horizon are going to take shape and once again help us continue the momentum. This election has clearly focused in on three main issues. We all know we have to grow our population. We all know we have to grow our economy and tax base. And we all know to do those two things, we have to improve some of our infrastructure in below and above the ground to enhance that quality of life. So ultimately, this campaign comes down to leadership. Who do you think best is able to carry out those priorities in our community and deliver the results that we need to deliver? I've been a lifelong leader. Regardless of what industry or what sector I have worked in, my teammates, my colleagues, my friends have selected, elected, or appointed me to help them carry that ball to the next stage in whatever that organization happens to be. It's about who can best get the deal done. We've got a lot of deal making to do in this city over the coming years. Every day in my work as a home builder, as a real estate agent, I put deals together. It's what I do. It's about knowing what it's like to deal with council. And that may seem odd, but as somebody who has stood at that podium and fought for issues that I cared about, I understand that perplexity. Sometimes, frankly, it can be intimidating. I've had individuals tell me they walk into the chamber and they're looking at a mayor, 10 councillors, city solicitor, city manager, common clerk, senior staff, and they're fighting for something that maybe at this point in its development is a little contentious. They may even have a gallery full of people who are challenging them, but their project is right, their project is good. I know what that feels like. I've been there. And I will have that empathy, that compassion, and that understanding to help guide them through that process. I've spent time working for our economic development agency, Enterprise Saint John, back in 05 and 06, Carol, when I think we first met, and had the real pleasure of helping coordinate our city's immigration efforts. Learned a tremendous amount of detail, particularly how individuals are coming through our provincial nominee program and what challenges they face and what services we can provide them to help them better select the opportunities to come here. Recently, I've been engaged with Develop Saint John on projects like the Fundy Quay, the South End School, and the crossings. Brought in to help form a conduit to get the facts to the people that are helping to make these decisions. So I've worked hard at all of those things. Saint John, I'm ready to lead. I'm very passionate and dedicated to our city. Our slogan is a very appropriate one. Saint John, it's time to build, and I am a builder. Thank you.
Opening, and thank you as well to Mel Vincent for his opening. Now, as we continue on with the questions, the first one is, our region has many important issues to deal with immediately. Tax fairness, labor negotiations, affordable housing, and competing growth initiatives, for example. How quickly will you get up to speed with such issues, and what kind of orientation do you require before taking office? And I'll ask if Donna could respond first, followed by Mel.
Thank you, David. Tax fairness, that is, we rewrote the paper on that, this council, so I'm well familiar with tax fairness. And what we're really asking for with that is every tax bill has two components, a residential and a provincial component, and residential only pays obviously the residential if it's your primary. So we keep 100% of that tax. The other taxes, two taxes, the city is keeping 55%, and the other 45% is going off to the province. We calculate that be about 47 million annually that goes. We get back about 17 million through the unconditional grant. One of the parameters on the unconditional grant is population, so we need to grow our population. So taxation, I'm good with that one. Labor relations, that's part of the 2021 workbook for council to do a 10-year labor relations strategy. That's very important. Affordable housing, we have the first affordable housing committee, and that should bring back a report to council in the next 6 to 7 months. So we've already started that. Competing growth initiatives, well, that's all your prioritization as well. A lot of the growth initiatives do require some bilateral funding, so you need to make sure that you have your partnerships well in place as well as you're going forward with that. How quickly do I need to get up to speed on these? I'm up to speed on most of them on all of them because we've dealt with them all through council. I don't really. As far as orientation goes, I suppose I don't need any orientation, I'm going to say. So I'm good with those items. Thank you.
Mr. Vincent, over you.
Thank you, Don. Obviously, one of the most critical pieces of our city's future hinges on how municipal reform takes place. To think back to the 60s when our present pieces of legislation come out and realizing we're just digging into that piece of legislation and updating it is somewhat surprising. I've already spoken to the Deputy Minister of Local Government, Ryan Dunahee, and spent about an hour and a half with him trying to get the parameters and understanding as to where they're going. I'm optimistic that there's a real understanding of this issue by the stakeholders who eventually will take this project forward. At present, and I really encourage all of the listeners today on this topic, you need to take some time and read the Green Paper. Go to local government and type in the Green Paper and municipal reforms, and it's a very easy document to read. 12 or 14 pages, but pretty basic, and it gives you some ideas and some thoughts as to what can be potentially on the table. The spot that concerns me maybe the most, Dave, is that that group is only going to take engagement till about the end of June, and then the working group will take over. And by this fall, probably 80% of the legislation that local government hopes to bring forward will occur this fall, and probably the remaining 20% will occur fairly early in 2022, and then that's what we live with from there. Now, I think the good news for Saint John is our Finance Commissioner is on that, and he is certainly somebody very able and capable of articulating our city's position and our needs and wants, and that leaves me with some confidence as to what our outcomes can be. But what I don't want to see is just a reshuffling of the deck. More responsibilities placed on us. We need to dive fairly deeply into that, and I know some of the questions today will deal with that. I think regionalization and reforms and how and what our local service districts pay will make a significant contribution to those reforms. However, but it's critical that our citizens get engaged, send their comments, and engagement has been a huge issue for all governments. Last municipal election we saw, I think it was 38% voter turnout. With the pandemic, is it going to be lower? Those are big concerns. As we drive forward and look at issues like affordable housing, something I've got a pretty extensive background in, and again, I know you've got some other questions that are going to talk about that, but the affordability factor really is no longer existent. Government policy over the last 8, 10, 12 years has put new construction, whether it's residential or apartments, out of the hands of the average citizen, and particularly some of our most vulnerable in this city. And the way we're going to make housing affordable is by increasing the supply that's not there today, and lowering that demand, and ultimately, therefore, lowering the price of the product, particularly in the existing market, where hopefully the average person is then going to be able to afford that product. When I got into the construction business a dozen or so years ago, it was affordable. In that time period, housing costs have risen well in excess of $100,000 on a unit. Apartments to build today, issues like free land and density bonusing, are going to contribute minimally to the overall issue. The real reality is it's just not affordable, and we have to allow the market to drive through and do its job to get that principle of supply and demand in place, and therefore something that's much more affordable.
What I've heard from both of you is that there's a lot of work going on. There's a lot of momentum, let's say momentum building within the city and within council and that. So what we hear from our members is we don't want to lose that momentum. There's a lot of work done from previous mayors and council. What would you do as mayor to continue with that in momentum and enhance it?
To continue with the momentum, you'd want to continue to support growth. You want to make sure that your growth is strategic. You want to make sure that your growth is integrated, as I say, with quality of life. And you want to make sure that you have a plan for growth. So, you have your, you have the Plan SJ. You also have your neighborhood plan for the South Central Peninsula, and the next probably residential area would be the North End for a plan. So you need to start connecting those dots, and you can support that through. There's all kinds of initiatives that you could support, continue to support growth through. I mean, we've looked at the one-stop development shop. We've tried to, eradicate red tape, shorten the length of time that those projects can happen. You've seen us tweak even the Plan SJ because a project is a good project, and even though in the plan, which is now 10 years old, and when that plan was put together, there was the understanding that it would be reviewed and revised in 5 years. That hasn't happened. So you've seen these last two councils tweak that plan slightly to bring and support that growth that wants to come to St. John. So, going forward, I think you just stay right on that track. And the other thing that I've planned on doing is when I'm dialoguing with all of these entities, I say, how can I be part of your success? What can I do? I'm willing to listen, to hear what people need me to do, what they need me to support for their success. So that's where I am. I just need to. We need more dialogue on it as well. But I think we do have that momentum. We need to keep it going, and that's the other reason why I'm running. I don't want to drop this ball because it's not. This is a big ship. You don't turn it around in a few days, So it's been a long process. It's been 9 years of putting that foundation together, and it's an important foundation. And there's accountability back to citizens in it, best use of resources that you have, and taxpayer dollars, all of the policies. So now you need to be committed. Keep your commitment. That's the big thing. Stay committed to the plan and go forward. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Donna. Mel, over to you. So the momentum, as we heard, is continuing. What are your thoughts on, as mayor, how could you make sure that that momentum continues and we don't reinvent the wheel?
Absolutely. Thank you, David. 100%. The success of our city depends on continuing the momentum, and somebody who has been involved in politics in this city at a very active level for 35 plus years. Dave, you and I talked a little bit at the start of this session about successive administrations coming in and starting over again. And regardless of who becomes the mayor in this city, it's a new administration and potentially a new outlook for our community. I want to be ultimately 100% clear. I 100% support the long-term fiscal plan that has been laid down by this council, and I particularly congratulate Mayor Darling for establishing that plan. It's based on a solid footing. Even though a chunk of it started before the pandemic, it's still been very fiscally wise and developed, and a great framework for us to build on. If I'm elected mayor, I will continue to follow that plan. It's solid, and there's no reason to change on it. So, getting up to speed and knowing those things, though I haven't sat at that table, my involvement in our community, particularly with Develop Saint John, I'm ready. My active involvement over those 35 years we're ready to go. However, there's also a reality, and Donna, I think you touched on it, that anytime a new leader comes into place, whether it's a mayor, a premier, or cabinet minister, so on and so forth, there is always some growing pains. There's issues that, I'm sure if Mayor Darling was in this room today, he could nod and tell us there's a few things that he has on his palette that only he as the mayor has. And it's a trust and it's a reality of leadership. There are some things, and obviously there's going to be a transition through that process. And it's going to be an awkward transition because of the pandemic. And, we're not even going to know when the results of this election are coming forward. But continuing momentum has to happen. I mean, there's nothing better than seeing cranes in the sky, men and women swinging hammers and pounding nails and driving screws. And, when you sit in my office looking out over the harbor and up towards Saint John, I think on one day I counted 11 or 12 cranes, now that's excluding the stuff on the port. And that momentum just has to continue. It's, you can see the energy coming back into our city. And I certainly want to work hard and putting more deals together to keep people working and keep our economy growing.
Thank you. And, as the momentum continues with this, one of the things that we're hearing as well is that the need to remove barriers for business and in things like the one-stop shop in the plans and adherence to those plans and frameworks allows us to do that. So thank you for those answers. Now, we have about $167 million in our budget that's been earmarked to make Saint John more attractive. And we've heard some of the instances from you on some of the initiatives going forward. But if you were the mayor, how would you redistribute that $167 million? Now, let Mr. Vincent answer this one first.
Thanks, Dave. Probably one of the biggest challenges that the next council and probably a couple more after that are going to face is trying to balance this reality of population growth, economic growth, and community growth. However, the ultimate real key to that whole process is if our economy doesn't grow, we're not going to have the funds to grow our population, and we're not going to have the funds to grow our community. Ultimately, I also look at the process of growing our city just the same as I do in running my business. I need to know who my competitors are, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and how I can best position my company to facilitate and get the results that we need. So I think a part of that budgeting process, and the reality is that we've got multiple layers of communities that we compete with. I don't like to say we compete with our, the greater Saint John communities, but in a way we do. To me, I look more at Moncton, Fredericton, Halifax, Charlottetown as if we're trying to attract businesses and attract people to our city. We need to have the tools in our toolbox. Whether it's you as a chamber, whether it's our university, whether it's our new economic development agency, these groups need to have those tools. And today I think we're a little weak in some of those. And if we can just grapple with the concept a little bit and drive it as most of our viewers here today do when they run their businesses and when I do mine, I think we can be a little more strategic, and I think that'll help us understand where those dollars need to go. But it is going to be a juggling game, and it's going to be a balancing act of trying to slowly maneuver in each and every one of them up. Developing the partnerships and the relationships that we need to is important. And again, ultimately, like I said in the opening comments, who best can help us build those relationships. Thank you.
Over to you, Donna. How would you spend that $167 million?
It's an interesting question, and one I've asked myself more than once. And so to deal with that question, I'm sitting currently on the Strategic Planning Committee, which has 3 councillors on it and 4 citizens on it. And so that's a question we ask. We have $157 million. Where do we need to spend it to get the growth that we want? So what we've done is we've commissioned 4 reports, one from Gardner Pinfold, one from Ernst & Young, and I can't remember where the other 2 are from, to look at what are the components of a successful city. So where should you be putting your money? Is it lowering your tax rate? Is it your quality of services? Is it parks and recreation? What is it? You need a balanced budget. So what of successful cities, what makes cities successful? Why are they successful? Transit systems, where do you need to put your money? I was recently reviewing play SJ, and it said at the time, now that was put together in 2012, and at the time, Parks and Recreation was low on the priority list for citizens, and roads and snow plowing was high. But we've always done, that's always been our mechanism. We're 10 years almost into that now. It's time, I say, to check that barometer again and have a look and see what do citizens want? Where do they want us to spend our money? I think that would be a good start for it, but also we need the data of where should we be spending our money to get the growth that we want. So your strategic planning committee right now is looking at that. I am part of that, and I see a shift going forward, because if we want to grow to become that dynamic city with a robust transit system, we want to make sure our citizens are engaged, we want the housing, we want the growth. I think we need to spend some of that 157 a little differently than we do now.
Thank you. Now, you've mentioned property taxes a couple of times. That leads me to the next question, and there's a little bit of a narrative on this. Property tax, as we know, is meant to provide the provision of shared infrastructure, roads, police, and fire. The provinces and federal government have the responsibility for social redistribution of wealth. And although we agree on helping our fellow man, is it the city's role to use property taxation to provide social programs? Should the city narrow its focus and improve delivery of the services within their mandate? Start with you.
You know, this question, I think, is one of the greatest ones that I had the pleasure of reading, and I only did just kind of skim them. You know, ultimately, governments, you know, at all levels for a number of years have almost been in that patchwork phrase, picking up whatever pieces didn't seem to fit. And you know, ultimately, a really solid discussion needs to take place in our society to determine what is the business of our various levels of government. Now, you know, that is clearly spelt out in the Municipalities Act, but however, the reality is when there are some pieces that got missed or dropped, and we see an opportunity, we just naturally as human beings want to dive in and help. And you know, when we look at some of the more recent challenges that society is facing, whether it's mental health, racism, sexual orientation, there's some complicated issues that, you know, have not been in on our governance radar, and they're now merging there, and we're trying to figure it out. So fundamentally, there needs to be a real in-depth discussion take place. Now, as a human being, I'm a compassionate individual, and I want to help people who are vulnerable and in a position that they need more from us. And when we particularly look at mental health, I can, you know, I fully acknowledge it's a concept that I struggle with, because it's not something I had any personal experience with until a couple of years ago, when my 8-year-old son started facing some anxiety issues. First, I thought it was just behavioral, and he needed, you know, just you know, a bit of more parental persuasion to help him come through. But as we dug deeper into it, and as we realized you know, the problem wasn't just behavioral, and you know, it brought on a whole new level of thinking. And again, I really appreciate Mayor Darling's approach and how he has talked about mental health, and you know, moving the ball forward on those things is still always going to fall to municipal leaders, and particularly as mayors. But you know, so we need to speak to those. We need to have them a part of our agenda. Now, how much fiscal monetary capital we expend to those certainly comes up. But that greater context of municipal reform, it would be a great piece to see this working committee and its green paper tackle, because I think all governments have had that you know, policy creep just go further and further, and we've started to lose. You know, society has changed. You know, the groups that picked up some of these pieces, you know, some are smaller, you know, like our church community and whatnot. So we're going through a whole complexity, and I think this would be a great topic that a mayor can become a champion of and drive much deeper into. However, as a society, we always have to look out for those who most need our help.
Now, Donna, what are your thoughts on finding the balance there? And should our focus be to improve delivery of what's in our mandate, and what are your thoughts on that?
I guess this is one of those questions where you struggle with responsibility versus advocacy. With this one, I think we have both of those. Yesterday with HDC, we talked about the 5 priority neighborhoods, and the council absolutely spends the taxpayers' dollars on agreements for those 5 neighborhoods. We've always done 3 years for them. We didn't do 3 years this year because of our budget. But that's an important component of an inclusive city. And I think you mentioned it in your opening remarks that there is a synergy between some of the social infrastructure and the business community as well. So I think it's very important. And I believe this, if the function of a municipal government is to make the lives of the citizens, the daily lives better, then we do have a responsibility there. So I accept that responsibility, and I think if you want to be that inclusive, dynamic city, then you need to spend some of your money on social infrastructure, because you need to be supporting all of your citizens.
Wonderful. Now, a couple of things have come up in terms of poverty, and you've addressed it, Mr. Vincent, as has Donna. The poverty situation as well as the housing situation that we have here in the city. Now, we know that the Real Estate Association has recently published some numbers in terms of growth in Saint John. And Saint John's real estate market is now the highest that it's ever been, and listing and inventories at historic lows. Do you believe that this means that our city does have a housing supply problem? And what steps should we take in order to alleviate some of the challenges associated with this? And I'll start with you first on.
Well, right now it appears that you do have a housing issue. And so how can we support development? And I guess development tends to follow populations. So we've got, I think we have to support that. We have done a lot of work with that through the reduction of barriers, like I said, with the one-stop development shop. We have the first ever affordable housing strategy that we'll have, as I said, in probably 6 or 7 months from now. You need to make sure that your housing options are there to meet the needs of all of your citizens. So you need to be looking at it through that lens as well. I guess for housing, I talked about it yesterday. There's a couple of different things that we could look at. One, if we're looking at affordable, is we do have the land bank and we work with the land bank. And two is Vancouver is looking at waiving the zoning for affordable housing units depending on up to a certain height. I think that's something that you can do to look at. You can support that. It's also the density bonusing. So if you're only allowed a height of 6 feet, you could allow 8 or 6 floors. You could allow 8 floors if those extra floors. And as every developer knows that the higher you go up, it flattens out your costs more. I mean, that most expensive floor, they always say, is the initial floor you put in. So as you go up, your costs go down. So, or I guess the cost to cover it over the square footage. So I think there are lots of things that we can do that would really help that. Yeah.
And over to you, Mel. I know with your background in housing and real estate as well, you may have some interesting perception on if we do have a problem, what should we do?
Absolutely. So first of all, I did not submit the question. wasn't aware that it was there. Absolutely. There, today in this present market, our supply is far less than demand, and it's not only in the residential housing market; it's also in the rental market as well. Both of them are significantly below the capacity now. We've got a number of apartment units that are going to be coming online here in the next year to 5 years, and as that comes on, it's certainly going to free up that market. And I think it's important to understand, why do we have a supply issue, and why is the demand so high? So without question, COVID has impacted the number of individuals who feel safe and confident about putting their home on the market. Particularly our older citizens who are looking to downsize, and a lot of those will probably move from the valley to the uptown core as the product that they're looking for comes online. However, they're hesitant, and the reality is the real estate industry is trying to facilitate showings and listing opportunities with the various technology like we're using here today. However, at some point there still becomes that interaction between the public and their home, and that's legitimately a concern and a factor there. So that reality is there. The good side of COVID has people looking at our market that have never looked at our market before. So now we've got this influx of people, and I'm experiencing it particularly from Ontario and BC, coming in with equity that they don't mind spending and are prepared to spend more to get the housing that they need because they're in that cash flush position, not having to finance, and are truly making a difference. So that piece has come into place, and now we have an industry that, you know, if we roll the clock back 5, 6, 7 years ago, vacancy rates were to the point that you know, apartments went empty, and the price pressure on a residential market was going downward. So it can change quickly, and I think as we come out of this pandemic, you know, it will be nice to see a gradual slide out of it, and as more inventory comes on, you know, I'm a big believer of the private market. It deals with these issues better than government does. When government starts to meddle in and tries to adjust policy when the market is in place, usually we don't get the results that we want. So in this case, I think there's going to be some short-term pain as we adjust through this. But you know, coming out the other end, I think we're going to be well positioned for growth and opportunity. I'm particularly encouraged about the inquiries I receive from the Valley looking to come back into the city, and I think it's going to bring a nice dynamic to our community. You know, on the affordability front, as I said earlier, it is really tough because, you know, and I respect what a lot of individuals are suggesting and trying to say. They're, you know, we can help move price with density issues, with land bank data, and with other programs. However, it just incrementally moves the bar. The fundamental cost to build today is just so astronomically high. It's not there. But again, by driving that product to the market that can afford it, it's going to free up the market on the other side.
Thank you. Now, sort of an extension of this in terms of affordable housing and the housing situation in our region, we hear a lot about rent control in condemned buildings. Why do we have so many condemned buildings? How do we create the bylaws that allow us to deal with those condemned buildings and rent control? So this is a sort of a one-off question. What do you feel about rent control, and how would you deal with condemned buildings? And I'll start with Donna.
You do have a lot of condemned buildings, and we need to work with the province in regards to that. There's a building between Water Street and Prince William Street that's assessed for $168,000. It's paying property taxes on $168,000. It's for sale for $1.2 million. So if the owner believes it's worth $1.2 million, I think somewhere in the middle is a reasonable assessed value on that, because what's happening is there is no incentive for that owner to do anything with that vacant, dilapidated building that's becoming a risk in the neighborhood. Vacant buildings end up with squatters in them. They get set on fire. There's nefarious activity that happens in them. They are so disruptive for any neighborhood. You don't want those. We have been putting money since the Mel Norton Council. We have put money every year into getting rid of vacant and dilapidated buildings. Part of the issue with that is there's a lot of work to get that done, so you need all the legal prep. You need to make sure all your I's are dotted, all your T's are crossed before you can actually go to demolition. And when you do go to demolition, it's only that physical demolition cost that you can get back from the province. So it's very expensive to do. We would rather have people take care of their buildings. So that, yeah, exactly. The incentive is in the wrong spot here for this whole issue. As far as rent controls go, I would be interested in supporting the province explore that issue and having a dialogue on that issue. I know that the cost of building is X, and if you want developers to come, they need to make money. So how do you balance that with rent controls? So that's a big issue. That's something that Saint John wouldn't solve on its own, but absolutely with partnerships, it's something that we should be advocating for, could be advocating for, at least looking at and asking for the province to explore that issue for us.
Over to you, Mel. What are your thoughts on rent control?
We're into that, back to that housing supply issue. And that's fundamentally what has caused this topic to come up. You know, in research that I've done, it's my understanding there is no market in our country that exhibits rent control today. And when you look at, you know, particularly to the U.S. where rent control has been in place, it's one of those topics that has usually led to more derelict buildings and more absentee landlords and a greater deterioration of our housing inventory. As I acknowledged earlier, right now we're into some short-term pain to get through this. But if I look back a couple of years ago when apartment owners were struggling to find a tenant, and today we've, in a very short time period, gone through, you know, and I know it's easy to say we need to exercise some patience and some understanding, but if we start, you know, manipulating the system with bad policy, we'll get bad results. And so I think it's critical that we stay the course. You know, I think we're almost there. A little bit of pre-planning would have probably prevented the reality that we're in and expediting some projects that were on the books and a city having a little better vision. But you know what? That's hindsight, and you know, I don't believe in going back and tasking people. I believe everybody tried to do the best we can. We now have that vision and understanding of how quickly things can change in this world, and we just need to have a little more foresight on it.
Now, moving forward with that as well, the housing issue, the affordable housing, the rent controls, that all plays a critical piece of ending intergenerational poverty, which is an issue in some of our areas of our city. So what do you think that the mayor and the council can do to help end some of the challenges from multi-generational poverty that's really pervasive in a lot of our neighborhoods? And how would you work with the provincial government to determine if a minimum wage needs to move to a more livable wage, and do you support that concept?
I'm happy to work with the provincial government and explore that issue as well. A living wage is something that's been talked about, and I think it's time to action some of that conversation. For intergenerational poverty, housing is a huge component of it, and we need to make sure, as I've said before, that you have housing available to meet the needs of all your citizens. But really the biggest, for me, what I have seen, and I've lived, my kids have gone to an inner city school, been in that neighborhood for 35 years. What I've seen is the game changer is education. And it was, I always say to my kids, it was Malcolm X who said that education is your passport to the future. And I believe that. So that's where I want to work with the province with that. I mean, education's their bailiwick, but how can we support that? And I was on the team with the new school as well. I was on with the Gary Lawson's team. And, you know, that is a game changer for a poverty neighborhood, because going back to another saying, the rising tide does lift all boats. And the kids down there, every kid that goes to that school will benefit from it. It doesn't matter what your socioeconomic status is. But poverty is a social determinant of health, absolutely. So there's a cost to the province in healthcare as well. There's a cost to the city for poverty. So we need to be part of the conversation.
So that new school in the South End that's slated to, what is it, next year, would be something that you would support and push for and have worked on that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Mm-hmm. That is a game changer for the kids, for the community. It'll be more than a school. There'll be several other components. It'll have a health component to it, you know, et cetera. So there will, you know, early learning center, et cetera. So it's a community center with a school in it, I guess, to a certain extent. But it's a huge game changer for poverty and for that neighborhood.
And now over to you, Mel, in terms of livable wage and what can we do for the intergenerational
Absolutely. I mean, the poverty issue has plagued Saint John for as long as I can remember. And, you know, I think we'd probably all be scared to sit down and look at how many millions of dollars have been invested in trying to solve this issue. And the simple facts and reality is the problem has only gotten worse. What we have tried, I almost want to say since the beginning of time, is not working. It is time to do something different. And as I prepared myself for this candidacy, you know, reached out to a lot of different stakeholders and community people, and you know, different numbers have been tossed around, but it's 100+ organizations working in a silo at some level of poverty eradication. And there's just no humanly possible way we can have that many entities in a city our size working in silos and duplication and money not getting to the root cause. So we need to stand back and really take a deep community dive, focus in with some precision as to what the root causes are. And so let's talk about the living wage. I mean, and I'm a firm believer that the living wage is not a replacement for the minimum wage. There are some sectors of our society, and we think of small part-time jobs that probably everybody in this room has had at some point in their career. Those are entry level. The industries that support them are generally not big profit makers. It could be David, you and I with our lawnmowers going around and mowing grass and shoveling driveways, scooping ice cream, those kinds of things. Right, exactly. So I never did that one. But on top of that, the city, and we've kind of referenced this in some other conversations here this morning. The city sometimes has to be a champion, and I think there's a real opportunity for the city to champion the living wage. I've spent some time talking to Randy Hatfield at HDC about this, and his insight, and just a wonderful man that knows that social policy probably better than anybody in this city, and somebody I've got a lot of time and a lot of respect for. But in our discussions with him, one, there's a dollar value to put to that living wage, and that probably is the piece that we need to have some community discussion on. But somebody who's got a family of four. Can't exist on minimum wage. It's just, there's no reality to it. And every one of us who runs and operates businesses know that. And sometimes it's a struggle when somebody says, you mean business people, you're not paying your employees enough. And that's an unfair criticism. Most business owners are good, solid people. They're wanting our community to grow, and we all know that. But having said that, I think there's a chance for the city to champion this living wage notion, where ultimately everybody who works with or for the city in some capacity is making a wage that they can actually live on. And I think if and I don't think we're far from that. I think if we really drive into those numbers, there's only probably a few little sectors that are close. So a phased-in approach, I think, could make a living wage a reality. And I think if the city can champion it, and I realize there's a challenge there, because I think as a council and as staff, it is our fundamental responsibility to try to provide the best service we can for the best possible price. But there's also a responsibility to help lift those who have been faced with this generational poverty issue. So I think we're close. I think a little more work, and if the city can champion it, then I think some of our larger sector employers can also start to see the benefit. And we don't have to be at the gold level. Maybe not even silver or bronze. But if we're starting in a phased-in approach and building the chance and opportunity for people to succeed, I think we'll get into those issues where pride starts to return, and home ownership and all of those other things can become the eventual reality, and maybe once and for all we can put this issue a little bit behind us.
So you've mentioned that the city would champion the move towards a phased-in living wage. Who would pay for it?
Well, ultimately, we as taxpayers pay for it.
Taxpayers.
Let's not kid ourselves. The city doesn't have any money on its own. It's all of our ratepayers, whether they're taxpayers or whether the fees and services that we charge and collect money for. But it's one of those things that I think our community is passionate about solving, and I think they realize it. And I think it's a good strategic investment, because on the flip side of the investment we make, it's the return we get from ending and helping alleviate this horrible reality. I mean, it's shameful that in a reality, and in a city as wealthy as ours, in a community and as a country as wealthy as ours, that we have the highest child poverty rates in the country. I know nobody in this city is proud of that. And I think if we said we got to pay just a little more, or we can't get just everything we want, I don't know if there's a Saint John out there that wouldn't buy into that program. And that's why I say there is some complication to it from trying to get the best bang for the buck, but the return, and sometimes that's what we as leaders have to look at. It's not only the investment, it's the return we get back, and I think there's significant return on an investment of eradicating poverty.
Now, just to further that question, how do you think we would pay for a minimum wage? We know that property tax, business property tax, is about the highest, And that's a big issue in our city, is the property taxes as well as the double taxes. So if, as a society, we're moving to a minimum wage, that changes the whole value for work proposition. What does living wage versus minimum wage? And we said everybody agrees we don't want anybody to starve and people have to live. Who would pay for the living wage from your concept?
Well, for the living wage, I think what we would start with is we would start with the city, and all city workers would have a living wage, but when we contract out to businesses, we would maybe ask for that from businesses. I mean, any decisions that I make, I like to have a little bit of data and a little bit of information on before I would make anything. So you would need the business community's voice in this conversation, absolutely. And you need some financial advice as well on this whole issue. And then we'd have to look at all that. I think moving to a living wage is a good idea. The mechanics of getting there would have to be worked out so that the burden isn't so burdensome that it's difficult for business. So, like I said, going forward, the way we've talked about it at the city would be like potentially, if we subcontract it to company X, that we would want to make sure that company offered their employees a fair wage, and that's. But right now we just go with the lowest cost, right? So it might be one of the components that we would add into our procurement policy.
So would that mean adding things like, are you B Corp? Are you, what does your corporate citizenship look like?
Exactly.
How do we extend that in the silos? Now, while we're on the topic of wages and city wages and mentioning the city's role in this, one of the elephants in the room on all conversations is how would you deal with the wages in the police and the fire department? Start with you, Mel.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the reality is our financial situation is a challenge. And again, in our long-term fiscal plan, we have laid out a clear wage policy that the city can afford. And until we grow our economy, and ultimately that's what everything kind of comes back to, we've got little room to maneuver. I'm a firm believer that our employees in any organization are our number one asset. They can drive things that management and ownership never can. So we need to show the value and respect of our employees that they bring to the table. But the reality is, at this present time, we're in a pretty rough spot that doesn't allow us to do things. But the employees know that. There's no surprise there. I mean, they're going to advocate and challenge us for more to make sure that we're being fair to them. But at the end of the day, the long-term fiscal plan and the policy laid out there needs to be followed and maintained, or there's little hope for our future.
When you're looking at in the mid-50s percentages, wise salaries, wages, and benefits of the whole city budget,
it's unsustainable.
It's not sustainable. So, Donna, what are your thoughts on the wage issues with police and fire? How should we deal with them?
Well, council controls the budget, and right now, fire and police probably have about $50 million of your $150 million budget. You need fire and police. They do a fantastic job. Going forward, what the city has done is we've put the wage escalation policy in place. So that's linked with our growth. So if our growth is at 1.5%, then that's where the raise would be, at 1.5% going forward. And we're asking our unions to agree to the wage escalation policy as their contracts are coming due. So I guess for me, it's important for it's the communication from the city. Every citizen needs to understand what their role is in moving Saint John forward. And at this point in time, before we have that growth, etc., we need to work together. We need to work with our unions, and our unions need to understand where we are and why we are presenting this wage escalation policy. So we signed with Local 18, and they took 2 zeros, 21 and 22, and agreed to the wage escalation policy in 23. So I mean, that's fantastic.
Yeah,
that's movement. Transit was the same. They have agreed to the wage escalation policy as well. So, like, it's working with your teams. I mean, those teams are our citizens, they're our partners, we need them. You can control your budget, you have to control your budget at the end of the day. But, you know, rather than just saying, you know, we're cutting you off or whatever, I want to say, listen, we are all working together to move Saint John forward. This is how you're fitting into it right now, you know, and in the future, I don't know what the future is bringing, but this is the path we're on. You see it, you know, things will change as we go forward. I can't turn back the clock on fire and police. I can only go forward with them. So, and I want to work with them.
Just one other question on the police and wages and fire. One of the questions came up on the community policing and how, you know, community policing in various neighborhoods, at-risk neighborhoods, et cetera, has found to be moving the bar on that in a very positive way. And that is one of the items, again, that has been subject, can we afford it, can we not afford it? If you were mayor, would you support the continuation of community policing?
You know, I think kind of a continuation of this overall conversation. I mean, the police and fire unions have told me their biggest piece missing is nobody's talking to them. Nobody's sitting at their table and conversing with them. So, you know, when it comes to policy such as community policing, we have to rely on those agencies. Those are the experts. They know what is working and what isn't. Now, philosophically, as a person, I've only seen benefit to community policing. But proper leadership will allow us to answer those questions. I think there maybe even is a bigger conversation to talk about, you know, our policing model. Again, the world has changed so dramatically in you know, in the last couple of years, you know, around policing that, you know, I think there's probably a discussion that needs to take place on just what is the model. And I had the real pleasure of talking to Dr. Paul Mayoral, the president at UNB, who has a criminology background, and he and I got into a quick little discussion on policing and the issues that could come forward there. And, you know, we've got capacity in New Brunswick that's world caliber to drive us into a deeper dive. And, you know, so I think resources that we've got here would be just awesome to work on. But as a fundamental concept, you know, community policing is so much more than policing. You know, they dive into the mental health issue and, you know, the tools that they have and the connections that they're able to make, you know, from mental health to jobs to, you know, guiding people who, you know, have, you know, parental issues and, you know, all of that. So, I mean, fundamentally it's there, and we're in that quagmire of not having the dollars we need. And so again, back to, we got to grow this economy and this tax base. It is, right, yep, absolutely, 100%. And, you know, that's why I came back with it's time to build Saint John, because without building, so many of these, you know, probably relatively solvable problems can't be solved.
I'm a big supporter of community policing. That would be something that I would absolutely advocate for. And I guess we need to talk to police, because I'd like to know what they see as core policing duties and whether this would fit into that or not. So going forward, I mean, life, as Mr. Vincent has said, life has changed. And one of the big criticisms that's come out of the Black Lives Matter issue is that police do not understand the population they're policing. And so how do you engage citizens and police and integrate them? And that's through community policing. So I think there are a lot of benefits, and I think police can also act as mentors in a community. So
the connection points between the community policing, the mental health, and some of the at-risk neighborhoods, and a better comprehension and understanding of the target market.
Exactly.
In some of my conversations with, you know, for example, Juanita Black and that, they have all indicated that a tighter connection would be much more beneficial for them. So let's switch roles for just a bit. Now, if you look out the window there, you'll see the Port Saint John, which has been a huge economic driver for us for centuries, and one would argue, you know, is responsible for, Saint John is here because of the port. And we've heard some things recently in the news, and this question appeared a number of times, so we have to address it. What will you do with AIM, and will you encourage the port to move them to another location?
Yes. Would you like me to elaborate on that? The west side refurbishment of the port is a huge game changer for Saint John. And right now, I would say that AIM is impeding the way for a lot of opportunity for the port. So, and that's for the port to figure out what they're going to do with them. But for me as a councillor for the last 9 years, it's been a difficult situation because I get calls about them all the time: explosions, dirt, dust, noise, etc. They are on federal property that the city has no jurisdiction over. The province gives them their operating license, so there's 2 levels of government. They are the next door neighbor. They're in the backyard of Ward 3 and across the water from Ward 3, so there's another level of government. So how do I deal with this? It's been a very difficult situation. And I often talk about growth being strategic. I don't see that growth as having been strategic, and that growth does not integrate with quality of life at all. I've been walking for a couple of hours every day, and when I did the Lower West Side, it's fairly hilly over there, and when you get up on the top of that hill, that scrapyard is in the backyard of all those houses along there. I can't imagine living there. And so at the end of the day, can you make an investment in your property? Because you probably aren't going to get it back. So it's a very, very difficult situation, I'm sure, for the port and also for citizens. So I would love to see AIM moved to another location.
And what about you, Mr. Vincent?
Simple answer, yes. Yes, simple answer is yes. It needs to move. Wrong location for that product and that industry, and just doesn't fit with what's there. And unfortunately, some of it is outside of their control, I think, and I understand and can appreciate the complexity of their business and not knowing what could be tucked away in a vehicle. I wish that we could have a better dialogue with the company to see if there's solutions, but it appears at all levels that there is little talk that can be had. So AIM needs to move. With the recent news that CP is excited and coming and going to develop more, I think there's certainly a far better opportunity for employment and economic activity with CP and some of the development and spin-offs that are going to occur as a result. And ultimately we might be trading 65 jobs for 500. That's a no-brainer. I don't need to sit down and discuss that. However, what I would like to discuss, particularly with our port businesses and unions, is that any of those 65 people that are displaced, to me, should also have first crack at the jobs that will come as a result of CP's investment in our community. So that's leadership, and that's what needs to occur when displacement like this also needs to take place. So, we had some bad decision making on the front end of AIM, didn't probably understand what they were bringing, and maybe took a short-term Band-Aid solution to, we need business and we need it, and we've got a spot here, let's do it. But as governments and as leaders, we need to be a bit more visionary. We need to be able to look down the road and see what impact the policy makes, and sometimes short-term solutions only come back to bite us, and we certainly need to be more forthwith in our decision. But at the end of the day, for every reason anybody can throw on the table, wrong location for AIM, and it needs to be somewhere else. And however we get that deal done, and ultimately, I fully appreciate there's a contract in place, and to break a contract generally costs, but the benefit, I think, is going to outweigh the cost, and we need to get in there and make the decisions. I think there's some tools in our toolbox, particularly from the Department of Environment, that can be leveraged, that will make everybody understand that the right solution for all is to move AIM.
Yep, absolutely.
All I'll say in addition to that is that it's been there 10 years. I don't want to criticize the port. It's been there for 10 years. 10 years ago, things were different. And so they took them on at a time when probably they were hungry, when they were hungry for business, right? And I had a tour over there, and AIM has made a significant investment in that area as far as their own infrastructure. So to move them, would be a cost to moving them too. So I think if it was an easy fix to move them, that would have happened. Yeah.
Now, the The final topic before we move into some of the questions from our online listeners is, again, another elephant in the room, and I'm going to address it directly. What are your thoughts on amalgamation? Should we amalgamate? Should it be regionalization? This conversation has been going on in our region for decades and decades and decades. As a matter of fact, we found some photographs in our archives that showed, you know, in 1840, we were known as the Greater Saint John Board of Trade, which included all of the encompassing areas, even back that long. So the whole concept of regions working together and disconnects has been around for almost 200 years. So what are your thoughts? Should we amalgamate? Should we move in the regionalization model? And I'll just leave it wide open like that and start with you, Mel.
Sure, yeah. And I think, if I recall, the Saint John Board of Trade was also or also is the oldest Board of Trade in Canada.
No, not the oldest. Halifax is a few years older.
Okay.
Yeah,
but pretty close.
We're like the second.
Hey, we take any title we can get.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, anything at all. Yeah.
Defend it later. You know, amalgamation is not the answer. It's going to cause too much disruption to the way everything unfolds in our society. And you know, if we look back to '67 when Lancaster, Saint John, and the parish assignments amalgamated, it probably fundamentally created some of the challenges we face today, that our turf is just too big. So making the turf bigger doesn't solve the problem. And I don't believe in discussions that I've had with local government that amalgamation is on the table. I don't fundamentally believe that they're prepared to go down that road. However, regionalization certainly is. You know, again, any of us that are owning and operating businesses, that kind of efficiency is what drives results. And I'm all in on a really solid regionalization plan. We have opportunities with fire, with police, with planning, with building inspection, with community recreational services. There's all kinds of avenues that we can go down that are truly beneficial to our community, will help with driving costs downwards for our businesses by delivering that efficiency. And if we just look at the model, you know, and think of our protective services and how many police chiefs and how many deputy chiefs and how many other management positions exist, if we were to combine those services in some model and transfer those management positions to frontline workers, we're going to get a better result. Then we can go back and we can talk about community policing, because we'll probably have the capacity to do those kinds of models. You know, I'm the son of a firefighter. One of the things that shocked me was that Saint John and the Valley do not have a mutual aid agreement. Now, at the end of the day, yes, one chief can call the other chief and get resources, and I know our compassion and helping side as a community, that's going to happen. But there is no agreement in place. And, you know, I asked a retired firefighter, why? Politics. Simple answer, politics. And a retired fire inspector who I've got a lot of respect for, he's been around a long time, he knows the game, and he nailed it. You know, he said that's all it is. That's why we're not having the efficiencies that we need to have. So, you know, I got a pretty solid background in the fire community. I understand it, you know, as a non-firefighter about as well as you can. There's models there that can work a lot better. I mean, you know, the Kennebecasis Fire Department is now looking at acquiring a ladder truck. You know, a $1.4 million expenditure. We've got one. Placing it maybe strategically in a different location and allowing them access to it, or allow the manpower, you know, is a caveat I'd love to throw to the Valley and say, listen, you know, we can save you $1.4 million if we just work a little better together. David, that's a no-brainer to me. I mean, there's no discussion to have. What community leader is not going to take that discussion on? And you know, so I just, it's frustrating as a community activist to sit here and say, boys, put down your shovels and get to work and make this stuff happen. You know, we've too long, I think, been too proud to say, you know, I need your help, or we need your help. Now, we've put our fiscal house in order, and that was what the outlying community said to us. Yep, you weren't somebody we wanted to partner with. We've made that decision, so the barrier is down, and I prefer to say now the opportunity exists. You know, barriers to me are opportunities, and now we've got an opportunity to seal this deal. And again, I go back to my skill set. I'm a deal maker. I think there's a deal to be made there, and I think we can collaborate so much better than we were. And I think at times we've tried to strong arm the valley, and that doesn't work. You can't make deals going in swinging. And unfortunately, over the last 5-6 years, we've taken a stick approach, and if both sides don't win, you don't get a deal. And we've tried to go in and be the only winner in the deal. I think if we go in with the right mentality, I know those communities want to help us.
What are your thoughts, Donna?
I don't see that in our immediate future. I would have to see a business case on that going forward if we were going to even look at it. We just invested $220 million into a water system, so you would absorb a lot of.
One of the regions has an outstanding water issue as well.
Yeah, and then another region just has a lot of wells, and so that's the other side of that coin is what infrastructure would you be absorbing as well. The other thing I'll say is that I see us as such diverse communities as well, and I think working as a region, we're stronger. A lot stronger. There's a lot of efficiencies you could find there. I think, like I look at roads, I look at waste management, right, exactly. And I mean, there is one landfill now that everybody's going to anyway. So, and there would be efficiencies with administration of those, all of those services that if you amalgamate, not amalgamate, but if you go for regionalization, then you would have more buying power too as a bigger unit. So I think you could reduce costs with that, and you could improve the service delivery to citizens with it. I think regionalization is one of your questions is, what do you see some of the big opportunities for Saint John? I think that's one of them. That's a huge one, in my opinion.
We've long advocated for some kind of a regionalization model. Former chairs have always said that the services that you've mentioned, whether they're fire, policing, recycling, garbage, disaster management, emergency management, all of those could be regionalized in some way, and we've taken some heat for that as well. So as you move forward towards that regionalization model, I think it's going to take the consensus and the buy-in of the entire region, and that will be one of the biggest challenges I think that we face here. We're going to move to one of the questions that we've had submitted online. And it said, first of all, with the candidates' views with respects to industrial parks, it appears that they are not transitioning to Envision Saint John, and there's absolutely no reference to them on the city's website. Given the exponential growth of the industrial parks in Moncton and Halifax, this is a huge gap and potential economic loss for our community. So.
On developing an industrial park?
Industrial parks. Are we doing enough to keep the industrial parks going, or are Halifax and Moncton overtaking us?
Well, Halifax has had an industrial park, and a large one, for a long time. And I guess it's the old story, once you start to build a critical mass, then you have more growth with it. So I think, we certainly have started that. We haven't necessarily historically look to put business and industry into an industrial park. But I think that now that we do have that focus, absolutely. So I see us moving towards an industrial park. I mean, Ames, one of your prime examples. Now that's not on our property, but still, it's having that availability with the industrial parks as well. So
we have a number of them in Saint John. Now, your thoughts on our question?
Absolutely. I think if I understand the point of the questioner, as Develop Saint John has kind of wrapped up its identity, and as Envision takes place, that seemed to be one entity that got shuffled. And I know we always had a dedicated employee that looked after it, and a real knowledgeable individual who understands the complexity of our parks and knew the tenants well, and was always advocating. It's my understanding he now has been kind of tucked in under the legal department as we transition from one organization to the other. So I'm hoping that's something that just hasn't clearly got picked up. Yeah, and I think it's come. Now, our industrial parks play a significant role in the development of our city. They put the right business in the right location and give them the right resources. But we haven't gone forward in a way to have pads sitting there ready, waiting for a business to come. I mean, the reality to business, and again, most of your viewers, and David, I know you're well versed on this, time is of the essence in most opportunities. You know, a window opens, and if a business person doesn't jump through it at the right moment, that business doesn't come forward. And I think the issue that we've missed in our industrial parks is we've got the land, but again, not build ready. And we need to drive a little deeper into that to be able to accommodate a business, in particular in this world. We know it's going to happen quickly. Window's going to open up, and if we miss it, it's gone, and somebody else is going to grab it. You know, to take that a step further, business parks. Can you tell me if we got a business park in Saint John?
Well, we have the Brick Park, it's called, I believe. Brick Park. Yeah.
But we don't truly have that business park that other municipalities have. So our competitive edge is missing in that regard, and we need to do better. And so that whole, you know, industrial business park concept is there, and it's again, one of these no-brainers to me. It just makes fundamental sense. Be ready when the opportunity opens. If not, you're not getting the opportunity.
So just as we're closing, we're running out of time here, and I thank you all for your preparation work. I know that you've done a lot to help us and add content and value. So I am going to close with a single question on what do you see are the three top priorities for the Saint John region? And I'll start with you, Donna.
Your three top priorities for the region, we need growth. You need growth. I keep saying it needs to be strategic. It needs to be integrated with quality of life. People are looking for quality of life today. Times have changed, especially with COVID, because we can't travel like we did. We need to have quality of life available in our city for us. We need those bike lanes and walking trails and sidewalks, etc. You need tax reform. You have to have tax reform. It would solve a lot of our issues if we could get that tax reform. And I think regionalization is another big opportunity, and I think that's something that we really should be working together to get.
Tax reform and regionalization. Just happen to be our top two as well. No, what are your thoughts?
You know, absolutely. Those are the issues, and I'd like to take it maybe in a little different direction. To me, the opportunity that lies before Saint John, COVID. COVID has been a true blessing to us. Right, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it has put us on the map. David, you know, the world now knows where New Brunswick is. Not Atlantic Canada, not Eastern Canada, not Canada, but the whole freaking world now knows where New Brunswick is. We have done an incredible job of keeping our citizens safe and healthy, and I encourage everybody to maintain, get those masks on. We're in this little transitionary period, and it's a little scary, but if we continue to do that, the world is recognizing us. They're at our doorstep saying, what's this little place here? And I think if we can just manage this opportunity a little bit better, and again, be a little more proactive and dive in there, we can again take something that has been perceived to be bad, and it could be maybe one of the greatest things to have ever come across our desk. We couldn't buy that kind of advertising.
Yeah. Just in closing, then, I think a little bit of chamber promotion here, but further to the points that you've mentioned, you know, Saint John is on the map and we are being recognized. We did launch a program a number of months ago called Workation. It's designed to bring people that already have jobs to Saint John. What a novel idea. Bring people with jobs and the ability to work remotely. And we believe that once we get those people here, that we will be able to convince them that this is where they want to stay. This is where they want their life to be. So we're willing to subsidize that. So we're working with the provincial government to bring people here for 4 weeks workation, and we'll subsidize it for them, which is a try before you buy. Now, further to the points on Saint John's opportunity, someone not connected with the chamber put out a TikTok response on our workation and said, oh, look, you've got to go to Saint John, New Brunswick. Look at this place. It's beautiful, blah, blah, blah. Do you know we had over 25,000 people connected with that? And out of that, within a couple of weeks, we now have over 300 applications for people that have jobs, that want to move to Saint John, so the ball is in our court now. And, you know, that's where with two excellent candidates, and I'm very, very happy with the direction that we've heard from you. Many of the priorities of our chamber have been addressed, and I thank you. I thank you both for stepping up to the plate, offering your time. It's not an easy decision to make whether to run. We see what happens out there all the time. It's just nasty. It's just nasty. So my hats go off to both of you for the sacrifices that you're making, and quite frankly, a lot of the crap you're putting up with too. So thank you once again for coming. I very much appreciate it, and I value your content. And good luck to the both of you. And thank you to your teams as well. Thank you, John, Tom, and everybody. And have a great afternoon, and stay safe and well, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.